Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. I'm James, continuing on with this Balsa USA Smoothie build. And it is coming along, it's getting closer, but I still have a few steps to go before I can take this out for a maiden flight. In this video, I'm going to be hinging the control surfaces. I'm going to be using just CA hinge material as you see here, and I'll get into that in just a second. But I did want to mention one thing. I did get a comment last week from Alan regarding the tail wheel bracket. Now, he remembered, and I forgot to explain it, but he remembered that I originally thought I was going to be using this Debro tail wheel bracket instead of the setup that came with the kit, and I didn't explain why I ended up not using it. So if you look at the bracket here, you can see there's a 90-degree angle between the base, move this around, between the base of the bracket and then the wire. Right, so there's a 90-degree angle there. But if you look at the rear section of the plane here, you can see, hopefully I got that set up right. You can see, yeah, you can see that the angle between the bottom of the airplane and the back is greater than 90 degrees. So I can't use this bracket because if I mounted it on here, as you can see, it wouldn't line up. See? And I couldn't just stick it straight on here and then bend this, because if I bent it, it wouldn't work. It would just basically bind up. It wouldn't be able, the rudder wouldn't be able to move freely. So I didn't use this. And the other thing I could have done, and I thought about doing, is maybe I would wedge, kind of put a piece of wood or something and wedge it up like this to get it to get that wire to be parallel with the axis of the rudder, the hinge line. But that would just look kind of weird, and also I think it would be kind of too flimsy. So I just kind of decided not to use this, obviously, and to go with what came with the kit. Okay, so thanks for catching that, Alan. That was a great comment, and I appreciate you doing that so that I could explain that. So if other people had the same question, hopefully that'll answer it. Okay, so now let's go ahead and move on to hinging these control surfaces. All right, so my wing is sitting over there on the other table, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the tail section. So I'll set my ailerons off to one side, and let me see here. Let me grab the plans. So the plans they basically mark out where they think you should put the hinges. And I'm just going to go ahead and follow that. I'll measure in. I'll just measure in and mark it on the plane so I put the hinges in the right location. So there's the elevator. Here's the rudder. So there's 3 hinges on the rudder. There were 4 hinges on the elevator. And then one thing I did want to remind everybody about was that you remember, and I'll put the number up, but you remember when I built the wing, the wing has basically the trailing edge of the wing was hollow. It's just the two pieces of balsa kind of planks kind of came together like this, and it was hollow on the inside. And I put wood wedges or blocks inside here so that I can plug the hinges into those wedges. But I did make a little mistake when I did that, is I didn't push them all the way back to the edge, so there still is a little bit of a gap in there. That's okay. And you can go back to that video and take a look at what I did there. But so what I did is I marked on my plan where I need to put the hinges based on where I put those wedges in the wing when I constructed the wing. That's what these little blue marks are. So I'll just put this on the wing when I get to it, and I'll mark it off so I know where I am. And I may make the hinge a little bit longer so it kind of goes back a little further into the wing. So that's kind of the plan. So let me move these out of the way for now. All right, so for the CA hinges, of course, you can buy kind of pre-cut hinges. And for this size model, probably a good size to use would be something like about a 1-inch long by about 3/4 inch wide hinge. And this hinge material, I think this was Great Plains hinge material. And I don't think that company's around anymore, but you can just find this kind of CA hinge material on there's a lot of resources online, so it's pretty easy to find, this kind of sheet material like this. And then I'll be using just a thin CA and to glue them in. And so what I'll do is I'll show you kind of how I'm going to do that. I'm going to cut these and I'll show you that. And I'm going to cut a whole bunch. I'm going to cut, I think I needed, let's see, I needed 4 and 3, that's 7, and then 6 more, so that's going to be about 13 or 14 hinges. So I'll show you that right now. All right, so here's my material. Now I don't have very much left, so I need to make sure I don't waste any. And I did a little math, so again I have 4 on the elevator and 3 on the rudder, so that's 7. And if I make them 3/4 of an inch wide, then I will need 5 1/4 inches of material off of here. And then for the wing, since I want to go a little bit longer, I think I need a little bit more material, which I'll cut off later. But I'm going to start with the rudder and the elevator with those dimensions that I mentioned, 1 inch by 3/4 of an inch. So what I'm going to do, so I don't waste my material, I'm going to measure 5 1/4 inches. And hopefully this will make sense once I kind of get it done here. But I'm going to go ahead and cut to 5 1/4, somewhere around here. Doesn't have to be perfect, but I like having these grids, these kind of cutting pads, because I can use them for a lot of things like this. This will just help me eyeball it. All right, somewhere right about there. Set this aside, and now I'll just kind of go down the middle now. This aside. All right, so now we just got to cut 3/4 inch strips out of here. This is probably why a lot of people probably just buy them already cut. There's 1, 2, 3 quarters here. 1, 2, 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. Oops. And really, you know, I could just kind of just eyeball this and cut it with my scissors and it would be fine, but I'm just going to try to keep it on the clean side just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so now I'm just going to go ahead and use my scissors. Okay, so there are my elevator and rudder. And then what I'm going to do is just going to cut off the corners. And that's just going to help sort of when you slot the wood, having the corners cut off helps them slide in a little bit better. So I'll just cut these. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm going to make the ones in the wing a little bit longer just because I have that little gap in the trailing edge that I ended up with. And again, you can go back to that video. I'll post the number on it, check out what I did. You'll see I kind of had the right idea by putting the wedges in there, but I didn't push them all the way back to the trailing edge completely. I don't know what I was thinking. For some reason I was thinking I was going to have a problem with the two trailing edges kind of coming together, so I left them a little bit forward, and I should have just pushed it back and sanded it down, but it'll make sense if you watch that video. But it's not a big deal. This is going to work, and it'll be fine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just cut this one now down the middle. As I've said before, I don't ever claim to be an expert on what I'm doing here. I'm just trying to kind of share what I'm doing with everybody. Okay, so there's that one. And I think I can see how many I can get out of here. One, two, three. Okay. Yeah, so I can get 4 out of this one. I will say that, you know, I'm just, like I said, I'm using, these are basically 1 inch by 3/4. These are a little bit longer. And this size is what I think will be a good size. It's kind of like a standard medium size for like a 40 class plane like this. And if you're going to cut your own hinges, kind of research it, figure out what size you think you need, depending on the size of your plane, because you may need a different size hinge depending on what you're building. And now I need 2 more. These ones are going to cut because because of my material is sort of kind of running out of room. I'm not going to be able to cut it the way I did the other ones. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of trace these on here. Okay, so there's my aileron hinges, and these are my tail surfaces hinges. And then one last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a little sacrificial hinge, because as you cut your slots, at least as I cut the slots for my hinges, I like to be able to you kind of have to put the hinge in to make sure that it slides in nicely. You don't want to wait until you've got everything, kind of trying to set it up and everything to see if everything fits. So as I cut them, as I actually slot the wood, I like to just have one piece like this that I can kind of just slide in and use, because what will happen is as you do this, it's going to start to fray and stuff, and I don't want to fray my actual hinges. I'd rather fray sort of my little test piece here. So I'll grab something like that so that I can just kind of use that as a guide, if that makes sense. So I'll put that over here. So my next step is going to be to put a pin in the middle of each of the hinges. Now the pin serves kind of 2 purposes. One is, and I'm just going to kind of estimate in the middle where it goes, somewhere right about there. Right about there. So one thing that it serves, or one purpose that it serves, is that it acts as a stopper, if you will, to help keep the hinge sort of centered and to make sure you got kind of pretty much equal amount of hinge on both sides. And the other thing it does is it provides you with a little bit of a gap kind of between whatever the two surfaces are you're connecting, and that little gap just helps kind of facilitate the movement about the hinge. You don't want your surfaces right up against each other, in my opinion, and also when you go to glue it, it would kind of be a little bit harder maybe to get it to kind of move. So kind of putting that little gap in there with the pin gives you a little bit of sort of working space. Okay. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and put the pins in each one of these. All right, and again for my aileron hinges, as I mentioned, I'm going to try to push it in about 1/8 of an inch more into the wing side. So I'm just going to go ahead and offset my hinge a little. Offset the pin just a little bit, about 1/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick little measurement on these, and basically about 1/2 inch in is where I'm going to set the pin. So it'd be right about there. All right, so there's this set and this set, and I'll get these T-pins out of the way. So I moved my plane around because I'm right-handed, and with the camera and everything, I wanted to work in this direction, so I flipped my plane around for a different view. Okay, so what I did off camera is I marked the center line of the hinges based on the plan, and that's these little black spots, as you can see here, maybe if the camera gets it. And I also marked the center line right here, back here in the tail section. I put the rudder on, and I kind of estimated, and I drew the center line right there. That's where I'm going to put the hinge for the rudder, at least in the lower portion. And then I'll come back and I'll measure off the locations up on top here. So if I grab my plan and I just look at it, again, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm about, it's about 1 inch from the top, and then another one at about 4.5 inches down from there, from the top also. So I'll just mark that location on here. So about 1 inch is about right about there for the center. And then I also said 4.5 inches down from there, which is going to be right about there. And of course there's that one down here in the bottom. Something about right there. And then for the rudder, I have to watch out for my little, where the tail wheel is going to plug into it. So for the rudder, for the bottom one here, I think I'll probably put it, let's see here. Just going to kind of eyeball it. Somewhere right about here for the center. Oh, the pin's not very good. Okay. Now the way I like to do this is I'll put, like for example, for the elevator, I'll put all these ones in, and then I'll take and I'll set them in there. I won't glue them in yet. I'll put the elevator on it, and I'll just mark those locations on the elevator itself. Just so, in other words, I don't want to kind of measure here, then measure here, and then have them be off. So I'll set these ones first on the horizontal stabilizer, and then I'll just put this guy up against it, and I'll mark where they are, and then I'll do it from there. All right, so everybody probably has their own way of doing this. So I'm just going to give you the way I kind of like to do it, just the basic method, the way I do it. So if the hinge is sitting right in here, and I'll mark the center, or I'll just probably in this situation I'll probably just do it. I'll just eyeball it and not worry about marking it. But the hinge is going to be kind of sitting in here like this, right, when it's done. So what I like to do is this is a number 11 X-Acto blade, and it's obviously very long and very sharp. And what I like to do is I like to go in with the blade like this, and I like to start on one side and just push it all the way in, or as far as I think I need to go, about like here, and I kind of move it this way a little bit, and then I flip it and I do this side like that, and then I'll try to just work my way across from there and then catch that side over there. So I'll just try to basically do this side, do this side, and then kind of rotate it in and kind of clean it out. Now that's just the way I kind of like to do it. You can obviously do it this way and just kind of work it that way, do whatever you want, kind of just rotate it in. But what I'd like to try to avoid is I don't want to sweep over and then just cut too far. I just try to minimize how much I actually cut. So that's why I start and I edge this way and I edge that way, and then I clip out the middle, or I just go across the middle. All right, and the last thing I'll point out again is I want to be real safe. So I'll just put my hinge, pretend this is where I'm going to be cutting. I don't want to be, cutting like this. I want to be cutting with my fingers far enough away or back here. I don't want to be doing something like this and then accidentally slip and jam it into my finger. So be real careful, kind of offset where you hold it as much as possible. And then one last thing is, and it happens to me sometimes, is that you're trying to push this in straight, and then you kind of accidentally do it on an angle, and then you'll pop out. Maybe you'll pop out, the tip will pop out of the surface back here. That's not the end of the world. Just pull it out and then just kind of realign it. And because it's balsa, it's easy to carve. So just realign it and then just put it back in and just try to cut below. So yeah, if you do have a little mistake like that, that's okay. Then come back and cover with your Monokote or something. But usually that works out okay. So the main thing is just be really careful. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and mark the first one. So there's my center. It's right about there. And I'll just kind of go a little bit beyond it, like this. Then I'll just try to get some idea where the center is. Again, I'm looking at this at an angle, so it makes it a little bit more difficult. So I hope I don't mess this up trying to get it on camera, but we'll just go for it. Thumb out of the way. Okay. Okay, so now I think I got it pretty good, but I still think it's going to be too tight for that CA hinge. I'm just going to kind of work with it a little bit and try to, I don't want to split the wood, but I just want to kind of work it back and forth a little bit. There we go. So I want the CA hinge to go in and kind of be firm, but I don't want it to be too tight where I'm pushing it in and I bend it or I fray it and something like that. I want it to kind of slide in nicely, but I don't want it to distort or tweak it out. So here's my little sacrificial one. Put it in there. Okay, good, there it goes. All right, so then I can take this guy and it'll be just like that. Okay, So I'll do these other ones, and then, like I said, so once these are on, once these are all in here, then I can place my elevator on here like this, and then I can kind of mark. It's going to be hard because it's black, but I'll just mark it, and I can put those other ones in. Okay, so there's the horizontal stabilizer with the hinges set. They're not glued yet. And now I can put the elevator on, and I can estimate where it's going to go. Right about there. And yes, my pen is black and the elevator is black, but I think as long as I can mark it, I think I'll see it. It'd be a little hard to do that, but I think I can do it. Okay, well, I changed my pen out for this red one. Still not going to be easy to see, but it'll be a lot, I think it'll be better. And then, of course, the way to clean any kind of markings off of Monokote is just to use some acetone or alcohol. Yeah, I'll be able to see this fine. Now the slots that I cut are going to be a little bit wider anyhow, so that gives you a little bit of room to kind of move things sideways as needed. Okay, so there's my 4 marks. Alright, so I'll just start with this one out here on the edge. Again, I'm being real careful. One thing to know, even if I go kind of off center, you can still recut it. And again, you know, being balsa, it's somewhat forgiving. And once you kind of soak it with the CA, it's not going to be the end of the world if you had to kind of re-slot it. You don't want to do that, but it happens. If you ever buy an ARF and they have them cut for you, you'll see that they're really long. At least the ones that I've seen. The slots are almost twice as long or 3 times as long as the actual hinge is wide. Okay, that one's good there. All right, let me do these other 2 real quick. All right, so everything's been cut, and now I'm going to carefully try to get this attached here. And this isn't always the easiest thing to do either, because it's kind of hard to get them straight on without kind of bending them. And I will, like I said, I do use my little sacrificial hinge material to kind of clean out and make sure everything goes in nicely. And kind of by running it through to, oops, I'm sorry. Also by kind of running it through into the slot like this, it does help kind of clean it out and kind of helps, at least I think it does, kind of helps kind of widen it a little bit. Okay. And you kind of see again, like you can see what happens as you use these, they get really frayed. I just don't want that happening to the hinges that I'm going to be gluing, so I just kind of, that's why I use this. Okay, here we go. Might as well start down here. Just stick it right on the end. That's why it's really helpful to have those little corners cut off. And that's nothing that I invented, because I've seen it on the ones you purchase. You see they're kind of octagonal or whatever you want to call them. Kind of the shapes. All right. So the way to do this is slowly, a little bit at a time, kind of work your way. I like to, you kind of think about it as trying to close it up like this. So Okay, there we go. And again, the nice thing about having those pins in there is that gives you that little gap in there. I'm going to leave them right now, and I will check to make sure everything is good before I glue, but I think that looks pretty good for the elevator. And I'll move on to the rudder. So as you can see off camera, I installed the hinges on the fin and in the back part of the tail here, and I also slotted the rudder, and this is ready to be installed here. The only thing I need to do though is I also need to put the tail wheel on at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fish the tail wheel through here like this, and then I'm going to use just some 5-minute epoxy. So I'm going to use my JB Weld 5-minute epoxy, and I'm going to stick some epoxy in here, and then I'll slide that over the wire as I put the rudder over the hinges. So I certainly don't need a lot of epoxy for this, so just do a little, just going to do a little drop here of each part. I'm going to carefully just put it in that little slot. It's going to get a little messy, but I will clean it off after I put the wire in. I'm going to use a little pin to kind of get that stuff down inside there. Oop, this pin's not good. Alright, well, this is a better pin. Let's get that in there. Kind of work that epoxy in there. Okay, now carefully I'll put this on here. Problem is I got to kind of do it all at once here. It's going to be a little tricky. There it goes. I don't usually like tail wheel wires set up like this. I like having it sort of attached along the bottom of the rudder so that I can easily kind of make adjustments or change it if I have to. Kind of sticking it in the like this kind of makes it a little more less friendly. Almost got it in there. So I'm going to put a little further. Maybe this will. Okay, like that. And of course I can adjust this little, my little collar there when I need to. Alright, so there's the tail section all hinged up with the tail wheel. I'm not going to glue it right now with the CA. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and move over to the wing, and I'll hinge the ailerons, and then I'll do the CA gluing all at once. So here's the wing ready to go, and what I did is I marked my 3 spots with my Sharpie based on the plan like I mentioned before, and now I can go ahead and install the ailerons. So what I'll do is I think I'll get probably put it up on its edge. Move this out of the way. Get this guy out of the way. And once again, I'll just go ahead and I'll mark my limits for each hinge. All right, so here we go. This wing is all hinged up now. And now I'm ready to go ahead and glue these in with the CA. So what you want to use, if you haven't done this before, is a thin CA. You don't want to use a thick CA. You want the thin CA because it's going to wick into the hinge and get a really good bond. And you want to let it sit for a few minutes before you mess around with it. You don't want to use a accelerator, and you don't want to use a slow CA or anything like that. Slow CA won't wick in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead, and the amount of glue you put on each hinge is kind of a judgment call. You'll see some sources say, you know, they don't tell you anything. They just kind of soak it, maybe 3 or 4 drops, things like that. So you just have to kind of use your best judgment. Hopefully you get it in there. I may flip it over and do a couple drops on each side of it also, and just try to work it in there hopefully, and it'll work out for you. I do have a little visitor that came today. It's a little, I don't know what this is, a little beetle kind of dude, but I don't have to let him outside, but he's been flying around in here, or she, I don't know what it is. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and remove my pins and give it one more check. I'll do this side first, make sure everything is good. I'm going to try to push this one a little bit more in this way. And let me see if this one's going to go a little bit more. About there. And here we go. Okay. All right, you let that sit for a minute or two before we mess with it, and we'll come back and we'll kind of flex it and get it moving. Let's do this side. These guys out of here. I'm putting about 3 or 4 drops on these right now. Let me go grab the fuselage. Pull off my little stickers, or tape I should say. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. So the ailerons are on here now. We'll work them back and forth a little bit. Very nice. Let's flip this side over here. There we go. Lots of free movement. You know, in the worst case scenario is something gets messed up and it gets off center or doesn't move right. You can just cut these out and then just put the hinge right next to it. You know, so you know there's a little bit forgiving if you make a mistake. It's not the end of the world. Okay, there's that one. Looks pretty good. And let's look at the tail section. Yeah, so we got our throw, and go back and forth on this guy. Okay, there's our little tail wheel. Looking pretty good. All right, very good. This will loosen up a little more as we work with it. All right, so that's going to be about it for hinging the control surfaces. And then my next step is going to be to grab the canopy here. It's going to be to put the canopy on, as we'll see right there. And I'm going to put a couple pinstripes on this. I'm also going to add this checkered sticker material, which is going to be a band kind of across the fuselage right there, maybe a few numbers. And then after that, we're going to be putting in the engine, the tank, the electronics, and hooking up all the control surfaces and start thinking about our maiden flight on this thing. So thanks for watching my channel. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.